Hello, today I want to talk about growth as a strategy for picking stocks. That is, do stocks that grow faster outperform stocks that grow slower, or maybe even negatively? In this context, I'm talking about earnings growth, but you can also think about other metrics like revenue growth. It turns out that if you're using growth by itself, it is not a winning strategy for picking stocks. Let me first remind you that, in my opinion, growth is not the opposite of value, and value is not the opposite of growth. They're two mutually exclusive concepts. And I have a presentation on this, which you can check out if you follow this link here below. Let's start with historical growth. The question is, do stocks that have grown faster in the past outperform stocks that have grown slower or maybe even negatively in the past? Turns out this is not true. In fact, if we look at the spectrum of stocks on a growth metrics, we find out that the stocks that grow the highest, the extreme, and the stocks that grow the lowest, the extreme, underperform the market as a whole. It's a very nonlinear payout. It's also not a very good strategy to buy the highest growing stocks. Now you're thinking, Brian, well, of course, if we look at the past, that's going to be the case. What we need to do is look at the future. So if we look at forecasted or estimated earnings growth, do the stocks that are forecasted to grow faster outperform the stocks that are forecasted to grow slower? Turns out, again, this is not a winning strategy. Using forecasted growth does not work. Well, now let's just say we had perfect hindsight. We had a crystal ball. We're able to know in advance which stocks grow the fastest and which stocks grow the slowest. If we pick the stocks that we know for certain are going to grow the fastest, does this work? Because we know analysts aren't perfect, but if we were somehow perfect, would this work? Turns out Brian Bradshaw is wrong. In this situation, even with perfect hindsight, the stocks that end up growing faster do not outperform the stocks that grow slower. And you say, well, what about this whole smart beta thing? We talk about this all the time. How does growth work in a smart beta context? So here's some smart beta factors. And here you can see that, in fact, growth underperforms. It is a losing alpha strategy. It does not work. Now, well, what about, hey, Brian, what if we look at GDP growth? Do stocks in countries with higher GDP growth outperform stocks in countries with lower GDP growth? Turns out this is not the case. GDP is actually negatively correlated with equity returns. So I just want to say, keep this in mind, that if you're using growth in a univariate way, isolated by itself with no other metrics involved, it is not a winning strategy. High growth does not outperform low growth. Thanks so much.